from the left, Mr. Jimmy Wales, and do not call him James. And you probably know his amazing feat of creativity, Wikipedia. Next to him, let's have everybody.
Sounds like one person's used it, anyway.
Next to him is Jay Carney, who runs communications and public affairs globally for a little company called Amazon that some of you may also have used. I don't know. Next to him is Joe Schorndorf, who is a longtime Axel Capital man. If you've used Facebook, you owe them a debt of gratitude for writing a rather large check, I think. What's another big Axel hit? I mean, what's another big Axel hit besides Facebook?
Today, I think Slack.
Slack, okay. All you on Slack. And then last but not least, Rashad Tabakawala, who is chief strategist at Publicis Group, which means he's the brains. Everyone else is just the beauty, and he's the brains. So go to it, guys.
Perfect. Thank you. As you can imagine, we had so much talent that this particular group is only names beginning with J besides me. So we've got Jimmy, Joe, and Jay. Very quickly, this is about disruption. So I'm going to start with Jimmy. What do you believe is disruption?
Well, I mean, for me, disruption is when we're caught by surprise by changes that weren't previously anticipated, which means sometimes things like planning for disruption are very, very difficult. And like one of the examples that I think about a lot and look at, the rise of the Wikipedia community model has disrupted a lot of our thinking about, for example, copyright. So copyright used to be a regulation on publishers, and now copyright applies to everybody. And when we see changes to laws that in the past wouldn't have affected ordinary people, now they do. And I think that's the kind of thing that it was very hard to see when you first saw people getting PCs in your homes. Probably it didn't pop to the first of their mind. It's like, wow, we're really going to need to liberalize some of these copyright rules so that the Wikipedians can share their gifts with humanity. Who could have seen that coming?
Perfect. Jay, what are some of the most disruptive things you've seen?
Well, at Amazon, we don't really think about it as disruption. Disruption, in our minds, is the result of an innovation that works. And an innovation that works is usually the result or the outcome of a process that included a series of failed innovations that didn't work. And what Jeff Bezos, the CEO and founder of Amazon, likes to say is that we need to fail as much as possible, because by failing, we'll end up in the right place, which is with a surprisingly successful product or service that answers a need that the customer has. So innovation for us and disruption for us is the discovery of an ability to fulfill a desire or a need for one of our customers, whether it's a cloud computing customer for Amazon Web Services or a retail customer using our websites around the world. I just wanted to mention that startups are obviously all about disruption, and we just launched this morning in France a new service that we just started even in the United States within the last year called Amazon Launchpad, and it's a service that provides an opportunity to get to market quickly, to get on our website in a high-profile place, access to the millions of Amazon customers for French startups. And we already have 40 French startups signed up to Launchpad as of this morning, which is pretty exciting for us. And we look forward to a lot of disruption and innovation from those startups.
Perfect. And Joe, what are some of the most disruptive things you're looking at?
Well, let me define disruption and put a number on it. I had an opportunity, having been in the Valley for a long time, to look at the top 10 most valuable companies on this planet. And 5 of them were backed by West Coast venture capitalists. Apple, Alphabet, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft. Then I went back 20 years, and I just picked 20 years because that was kind of the first time I went to Davos. I did this talk at Davos. And who was on the list? It was NTT, it was Coca-Cola, it was General Electric. And those companies are disrupted. They're not there anymore. And then I went back and I looked at Apple 20 years ago. Stock was $4 a share, and they had about 4 months cash. Mark Zuckerberg was either 11 or 12 years old. Larry Page was still in university, hadn't thought about algorithms. Jeff had, in '96, was first year of selling books.
Just selling books,
And
right?
so you've got these companies that almost didn't exist that now dominate the information age economy. That's disruption.
When it comes down to disruption, Joe, you basically mentioned that there are some cultures that sometimes are set up to be disrupted, and there are some cultures that disrupt. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We talked yesterday, and you're going to get a great session right after we're done with John Chambers, who was, Cisco was the ultimate disruptor. They basically took all of the computer company networking standards and put them out of business. You want me to tell a story about DEC that we talked about? So this is a perfect example of why big companies go away. I have just been made the VP of marketing at Apple. Steve Jobs has just been fired. It's a bad deal. Don't ask me why I accepted the job. My team had to go sign up digital equipment. Quick hands. Anybody remember digital equipment? Raise your hand if you do. See, 3 or 4 hands, and it was the #2 computer company in the world 20 years ago. And they were going to, quote, replace IBM. So we're having dinner. We're going to have Macworld tomorrow. It's going to be the first Macworld without Steve Jobs on the stage. John Sculley, CEO of Apple, Ken Olsen, CEO of DEC. We have this dinner. At the end of the dinner, Ken turns to John and he says, I don't understand all this fuss about the PC. You're going to have 500 press people at this event tomorrow. He said, why do I need a PC? I have a VT100, a dumb terminal, at home, and I can dial up DECnet. And at the way home, John says to me how important it is we keep DEC as a customer because it's going to help Apple's enterprise strategy. And I said, John, if Olsen believes that the VT100 connected to DECnet is his answer, they will be out of business in 5 years.
Jay, what about you?
Well, the way I look at it, Amazon, by some measures in the tech world, is an old company. We're in our 21st year, but by the measure of a General Electric or legacy companies, General Motors, we're still young and fresh. And the only way to avoid being disrupted is by imagining that you're still a scrappy startup and that the imperative is to constantly innovate, to relentlessly innovate, to not look at your competitors, but to just brainstorm around ideas that begin with your customer. That's our culture at Amazon. Think first about what the customer might want, a problem you can solve for the customer, and then work backwards and figure out either the incremental inventions or the big idea inventions that can solve that problem. And that kind of thinking is what has led to Amazon going from selling, being what was envisioned as the biggest bookstore in the world to a store where you could buy anything you wanted from anywhere online, to the creation of Amazon Web Services and the creation of our devices and the expansion into making movies in Hollywood and all the other things that Amazon is doing.
Could you talk a little bit about Alexa and Echo?
Yes. Well, Echo, here's a perfect example of the culture at Amazon. The device that came before Echo, came after the Kindle readers and the tablets, was something called the Fire Phone. And my guess is there aren't a lot of Fire Phone users here. That was a big, big bet. It had a lot of inventive technology in it, a lot of really cool features, but I think it's safe to say it was not a success. And instead of curling up in a ball and saying, getting involved in building devices and competing with makers like Apple and others, we shouldn't do that. Amazon doubled down and went forward with this far-field voice recognition personal assistant called the Echo, using this technology that's remarkable that we call Alexa, which is really the beginning, in our view, of an ecosystem around the Internet of Things that will have you using this device and devices like it for so many things, to turn down your lights, to turn on your alarm, to check traffic and weather and music, things you can do right now, and then the applications, because it's open sourced, are, go on for there infinitely.
Jimmy, what about disruptive cultures? What makes disruption happen, and how do you fight disruption?
Wow, I mean, I think one of the most important fundamentals with respect to disruption is a culture of openness, of sharing ideas. One of the reasons, Joe and I were just talking earlier today, one of the reasons that Silicon Valley became so dominant compared to other, Route 128, is that there was a culture in Silicon Valley of engineers talking to each other. Even today, if you start up a company in Silicon Valley and it fails, that's not really viewed as a black mark. Then you get a great job at Google because you've done something interesting, and everybody understands startups fail for all kinds of reasons. You are at the wrong time, too early, too late. There's a lot of different reasons, and that kind of open mind to change and adaptation is exactly where disruption comes from, and we need to cultivate that throughout society, in my opinion.
So the three of you all, and each of you all can answer this question in whatever way you want. We talk about disruption, but there is a belief that the companies that have become the biggest disruptors, whether it be an Amazon or a Facebook, or even Wikipedia, which is not a company, are themselves unlikely to be disrupted because they have actually become so dominant that it's really hard. So could each of you all talk a little bit about that, both your own companies as well as broad thoughts, including Facebook?
Nobody is safe. Let me repeat that. Nobody is safe. When I came to the Valley, the dominant force in the technology world was called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Snow White was IBM. They owned 90% of the mainframe market. I challenge anybody here to tell me who the Seven Dwarfs were. The cloud was an IBM 370 with a 3270 workstation. In effect, all 8 of those companies are gone. And then we went to the mini computer companies. DEC, Data General, nobody's left. Then we went to the PC companies. Then we went to the server companies, Apollo, Sun. So to sit here and say today's dominant players are forever is just not going to happen. The question is, how long will they last? Some longer than others, but with when there's a major platform shift, and boy, we're going to have a lot of platform shifts, there are always a group of emergent new stars. If I come back here in 20 years, all 5 of the companies that I just told you about will not be on the top 10 list. I can't tell you which one, but there will be 5 new companies that will be on that top 10 or 20 list, and my job is to find 1 or 2 of them for our investors.
Absolutely. Jimmy?
So I think humility is essential. Amazon, of course, could be disrupted. The way to avoid or prevent that from happening or forestall it is not to become so afraid of failure that you cease innovating. If you're not, if you're afraid of launching a product or a service and that it might fail, then you'll stop creating things and innovating things that will be disruptors themselves and welcome entrance into the marketplace. There's a culture at Amazon anyway that is very focused on this idea that we can't stop moving, we have to keep creating, and we have to take risks, and there's an acceptance and an expectation that failure is part of the process that leads to successful innovation. And I think that, I can't repeat that enough, because it really is culturally, I think, what differentiates some of the successful American startups and American technology companies from technology companies around the world. It's that culture and that it almost celebrates failure as part of a process that leads to success. We One way that we keep ourselves enriched at Amazon is, we're a company that sells our own products, but we're also a platform or a service, a marketplace for many, many other businesses. Most people don't know that 49% of what you buy or can buy on an Amazon retail website in France or Germany, the US, around the world, 49% is not Amazon product. It's third-party sellers. It's tens of thousands of British small and medium enterprises, tens of thousands of French small and medium-sized enterprises who are using our marketplace to reach customers around the world that they couldn't otherwise reach. I think Emmanuel Macron recently said that 99.8% of all French businesses are small and medium-sized enterprises. Only 66% of those businesses have websites. Only 10% of those businesses sell online. We look at that as an opportunity for those businesses and for our marketplace to get, because the businesses that do sell, the small and medium businesses that do sell online, French businesses via Amazon.fr, export 26% of their products over into the rest of the EU.
Jimmy?
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. Nobody is safe, and disruption is always with us. So at Wikipedia, for example, we're very stable. Everybody knows the website, but we think a lot about what's coming next, about mobile. So we've got a new iOS app, which is very different experience. It's not just the website in an app. It's really looking at how to address the ways people are using mobile. So it's a lot more push. It's a lot more personalized. It learns what you are reading and suggests other things to you. If we don't keep up, then just the assumption that the way people use the internet is you go to a search engine, you type what you're thinking of, and you read a Wikipedia entry, that's changing. And it's changing in so many different ways that we have to stay on top of that. And you can never be complacent about your place. So this idea that, oh, well, these big players are here and they're all going to be like monopolies and that's the end of it. No way, no way.
So
although competing with Wikipedia is very difficult because it's a very, very bad business. We give everything away for free.
Got it.
And
So
ask
one
for a
way
little
not to be
donation now and then, yeah.
So one way not to be disrupted is to have a really bad business. That's a good thought. So all of us are old enough to have seen the 1968 movie, I think, The Graduate.
Plastics.
And in there, exactly, there was sort of, someone said to Dustin, the character by Dustin Hoffman, plastics, that's the future. If I were to basically ask you all to give me two words, right, and do it in any order you'll want to do it. One is a word that you believe is the future, that people should focus on, and the other is a word that is likely to be the most disruptive. It could be the same, but what would be the words? Because a lot of people have things, everything from blockchain to machine learning or whatever it is. So what would be the most disruptive or the most high potential thing that people should look at?
I'll answer that question this way. How many of you took a foreign language when you were in high school? All right. How many of you speak Ruby?
Oh.
1, 2. How many of you speak Python? Few more. So I would say language, but computer language going forward. Any language you learn, you can talk to. If you did Mandarin, you can talk to 1 billion people. You take the European languages, it's tens of millions. With Ruby, with Python, you can talk to billions of people around the world. So the lingua franca of the information economy is critical.
So for you, plastics is Ruby and Python.
I picked those as today.
Right. But language, computing language. Chet?
Well, I'm not an engineer or computer scientist. I used to be in politics and media. But what I've learned at Amazon is that the cloud, if there's a word, it's the cloud. Obviously, it's with us now, but its potential is only just beginning to be exploited. Because the cloud
we're going to need a V2100 terminal now.
Right. The cloud creates just enormous opportunity for obviously data analysis, big data crunching, that it's what enables machine learning, computer vision, robotics, artificial intelligence, and those are the areas that I believe, based on my experience in this world, will drive the technological future, and all of it depends on the cloud. And the cloud is incredibly empowering, not just for big businesses or for government agencies, because it's efficient and inexpensive. But for those same reasons, it gives enormous opportunities to startups where they wouldn't, now they no longer have to invest in their own infrastructure, their own servers, their own computer power. They can just buy it a la carte when they need it, and focus, use their venture capital for more innovation on behalf of customers.
Shimi?
I'm surprisingly old-fashioned on certain things, and I'm going to say education and learning, education and knowledge. We now live in an era, so this is what my advice to a young person. It's not plastics. It's keeping your mind plastic. It's basically, we live in an era where the amount of formal education is pretty stable. How many people graduating from university? Maybe it's going up 1%, down 1%. It's not a major thing that's changing. But the amount of informal learning has absolutely exploded. And as for young people, the thing they need to do is learn how to learn. Because he mentions Ruby. That's sort of the latest new language. I had to go back and learn Ruby just for fun. In an earlier time, we would have said Fortran. But the important thing is, once you understand the principles of one computer language, you can learn, the latest innovation, latest change, and so on. So it's that ability to learn that we need to make sure everybody's got, and online in particular.
Joe, you had something?
A more direct answer to the question. I was asked once, what was the most important invention of the 20th century? And I said without hesitation, the transistor. Everybody in this room has got millions of them in your pocket, in your hand, in your lap right now. I think the most important invention of the 21st century was the discovery of the gene. And what we end up doing with starting with the human genome, while the transistor created a several trillion-dollar business, with what I see going on right now in the Valley, we've got tens of trillions of dollars a market with what's going to happen to the advancement of humankind with the gene. So my plastics would really be the gene.
Okay. So a last question for you all, and then we'll wrap up. So my boss, when he's not running shows like this, has another job. He sort of runs a large company. And his basic belief is that we have to continuously disrupt ourselves. So his underlying belief is we are no longer even a holding company or a connecting company with something big. And the basic belief is everything is being disrupted. And somewhat to a topical thing, do you believe that governments are being disrupted? So I'll have that as the last question.
That they are or they should be?
Either.
Who wants to start? Government.
And you might want to go, Jay, since you worked in government, you can start.
Yes, they are, and there are many ways to address this. In my experience working in the White House, the way that governments communicate with the public has changed dramatically. And my predecessors as press secretary used to be able to dependably look at the New York Times and the Washington Post and watch the evening news, and that was the universe they lived in, and those were the media they had to worry about. And by the time I was standing at the podium, I was, even though I was well briefed on everything we were doing and all the questions that I thought we would get, members of the press would be looking at their mobile devices and asking me questions about something that had just been tweeted, and of course was completely new to me. So the atomization of the way that we get our information and the ability to spread it, which we tried to do in the Obama administration, using those same tools, has, I think, changed the relationship between not just government and the press, but government and the people.
Great. Jimmy?
Yeah, I mean, clearly governments are being disrupted in exactly this way, but also let's not forget how badly governments can be barriers to good disruption. by acting too slow and actually using mental frameworks. So I was talking about copyright earlier. The whole debate about piracy and all this, to me, it has been completely, it's all about Hollywood versus Silicon Valley, and the framework that people often use for thinking about that in government has absolutely no reality to the way people are actually using things online and doing things online. And so they're completely missing the point of this incredible revolution that's happening.
Joe?
In the spirit of very strong candor, let me give you what I believe is Silicon Valley's view of government. In 2008, Mayor Giuliani was running as a potential candidate to be the president to run against Obama. He comes to Silicon Valley. There were 4 or 5 of us that had lunch with him. John Chambers was there. The head of the group was Craig Barrett. Craig was the CEO of Intel. Giuliani comes in, sits down, and says, if I get elected president, what does Silicon Valley need from the government? Barrett said, we have 2 things we want you to do as president. On the very first day, we want you to get rid of Sarbanes-Oxley, get rid of Starbucks. We explained to him why. He said, oh, I didn't realize it was hurting you. He said, I'll do that. He said, what's the second thing you want me to do? Craig said, take this the right way. We want you not to try to do anything else and promise never to come back.
And so with that, we hope these folks will come back in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.